Tao Te Ching, a plain English reading of Laozi's ancient wisdom on flow, power, inner stillness, and the way. Ancient Chinese philosophy for modern life, leaders, and spiritual seekers by Aurelian Hart. Introduction. Marcus Thorne sat on a wooden bench at the edge of a grassy park in downtown Chicago. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the air smelled like cut grass and lake water. His phone, a device that usually hummed with the nervous energy of 100 unread emails, was currently sitting in the glove box of his car 2 blocks away. For the first time in a decade, Marcus wasn't checking the stock price of his company. He wasn't thinking about the server crash from last Tuesday. He wasn't even planning what he would say to his board of directors on Monday morning. Across the field, his 10-year-old daughter, Sophie, was running toward a soccer ball. She wasn't the best player on the team, but she was smiling. When she kicked the ball and it went wide of the goal, she didn't look over at Marcus with fear or a need for approval. She just laughed and ran back into the middle of the pack. Marcus felt a strange, heavy warmth in his chest. It wasn't the tightness of a coming heart attack or the sharp jab of anxiety he had lived with for years. It was peace. 6 months earlier, Marcus would have been on the sidelines with his Bluetooth headset on, pacing back and forth. He would have been barking orders at a vice president while half watching Sophie, shouting constructive criticism at her every time she missed a play. Back then, Marcus believed that if he didn't push every person in his life to be better, faster, and stronger, everything would fall apart. He believed that life was a war, and the only way to win was to be the loudest, hardest person in the room. He had been a force driver. He pushed his employees until they quit. He pushed his wife until she left. He pushed himself until his blood pressure was high enough to worry his doctor. He thought friction was the only way to create heat. He thought control was the only way to find safety. He was wrong. The change started on a Tuesday night that felt like every other Tuesday night. Marcus was in his glass-walled office in the Loop. The clock on his wall said 9:14 p.m. The cleaning crew had already finished his floor. The only light in the room came from 3 oversized computer monitors showing a sea of red numbers. Scale Up Solutions, the company he had built from a garage startup into a multi-million-dollar firm, was leaking talent. His top developers were leaving for competitors. His investors were asking why the culture was so toxic. His chest felt like it was being squeezed by a giant hand. He reached into his desk drawer for an antacid, but his hand brushed against something else. It was a small, thin book with a faded blue cover. There was no title on the spine. He pulled it out and realized it was a gift from an old mentor, a man named Chen who had retired years ago. Chen had been the only person Marcus knew who seemed to move through the world without effort. Marcus had kept the book as a souvenir, but had never actually read it. He opened the first page and read a sentence that stopped his racing heart for a split second. The way that can be told is not the eternal way. Marcus didn't know it yet, but he was holding a map. It wasn't a map of Chicago or a plan for his business. It was a guide to a 2,500-year-old secret called the Tao Te Ching, the noise of a breaking world. We live in a world that tells us to never stop. From the moment we wake up and check our phones to the moment we fall into a restless sleep, we are told that more is the answer to everything. More money, more followers, more tasks checked off a list. We are taught that if we aren't stressed, we aren't working hard enough. If we aren't controlling every detail, we are failing. This way of living is like trying to swim upstream in a flooded river. We kick and splash and claw at the water, trying to force ourselves towards some goal on the horizon. We get exhausted. Our muscles ache. We gasp for air. We look at the people around us and see them struggling too. So we think this is just how life is supposed to be. We call it the hustle. We call it the grind. But the harder we grind, the more we wear ourselves down. We end up with broken relationships, bodies that are falling apart, and a deep sense of emptiness that no amount of success can fill. We feel like we are constantly reacting to fires. We feel like a leaf caught in a windstorm, blown from one crisis to the next, never able to find a moment of stillness. This frustration you feel isn't a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are fighting against the natural rhythm of the universe. There is another way to live, a way that doesn't require you to burn yourself out to be successful. There is a way to lead others without making them hate you. There is a way to find a still point inside yourself, even when the world outside is spinning out of control. Ancient Chinese wisdom calls this the Way, or the Tao, the librarian and the gatekeeper. Long before there were skyscrapers or internet startups, there was a man named Laozi. He lived in China during a time of great trouble called the Zhou dynasty. The empire was falling apart. Greedy leaders were fighting over land. The government was creating thousands of new laws to try and force people to behave. But the more laws they made, the more people broke them. Laozi worked as a keeper of the archives. He was a librarian. He spent his days surrounded by the history of his people, watching as his leaders made the same mistakes over and over again. He saw that they were trying to fix society with force, and he knew it wouldn't work. Force only creates more resistance. Finally, Laozi decided he had seen enough. He was an old man, and he wanted to leave the noise of the city behind. He climbed onto the back of a water buffalo and started riding toward the mountains in the west. He intended to disappear into the wilderness and live his final days in peace. When he reached the Hangu Pass, the last gate before the wildlands, a guard named Yinshi stopped him. The guard recognized the old librarian. He knew Laozi was a man of great wisdom. "If you are going to leave us," the guard said, "please leave us your words. Write down what you know so that we don't lose your light." Laozi sat down and wrote 81 short poems. These poems didn't contain complicated theories or religious rules. They were simple observations about how nature works. He wrote about water, trees, empty bowls, and the wind. He wrote about how the softest things in the world can overcome the hardest things. He wrote about the power of doing nothing until the right moment. When he was finished, he handed the scrolls to the guard and rode away into the mist. He was never seen again. Those 5,000 characters became the Tao Te Ching. For over 2,000 years, these words have been studied by emperors, soldiers, artists, and leaders. They have survived because they aren't just ideas. They are truths that you can see with your own eyes if you know where to look. From force to flow. This book is about taking that ancient wisdom and putting it into your modern life. You don't have to move to a cave in the mountains or quit your job to find the Tao. The way is right here, in your office, in your home, and in the way you talk to your children. The transformation this book offers is a shift in how you use your energy. You are going to move from being a force driver to being a flow master. A flow master is someone who understands that the greatest power comes from alignment, not resistance. Think of a professional athlete who looks like they aren't even trying while they perform a miracle. Think of a leader who speaks in a quiet voice, yet everyone in the room stops to listen. Think of a parent who remains calm while their child is having a meltdown. And through that calmness, the child finds their own peace. By the end of these chapters, you will understand how to find your center when everything around you is chaotic, why yielding is often a more powerful strategy than attacking, how to lead a team so effectively that they feel they did the work themselves, the art of Wu Wei, or effortless action, doing exactly what is needed and nothing more, how to declutter your mind and your schedule to make room for what actually matters. This isn't about working less, it's about working better. It's about achieving your goals without destroying your health or your soul in the process. Why trust this path? You might wonder how a book written by a man on a water buffalo could possibly help you with a 21st century problem. The answer is simple. Human nature hasn't changed. We still get scared. We still get greedy. We still want to be loved and respected. And most importantly, the laws of nature haven't changed. The Tao Te Ching is the second most translated book in history, right after the Bible. It has been used by people in every possible situation. We will look at the lives of people like Bruce Lee, who used these principles to become the most famous martial artist in the world. We will look at General Zhuge Liang, a brilliant strategist who won battles without ever drawing a sword. We will even look at modern leaders like Warren Buffett and Ernest Shackleton, who showed that Taoist traits like patience and humility are the keys to lasting success. This wisdom is not a philosophy to be debated. It is a tool to be used. It has been tested for 25 centuries in the most high-pressure environments imaginable. It worked for Laozi in a decaying empire, and it can work for you in a high-pressure economy. The story of Marcus Thorne. We are going to follow Marcus Thorne on his journey. When we meet him again in the next chapter, he is still that stressed-out CEO in the glass office. He is at a crossroads. His doctor has warned him that his body is hitting a breaking point. His daughter is starting to treat him like a stranger. His company is on the verge of a crisis that he can't force his way out of. Marcus is like many of us. He is smart, hardworking, and successful by every standard the world cares about. But he is also miserable. He feels like he is holding up a heavy ceiling with his bare hands, and if he lets go for even a second, it will crush him. Throughout this book, we will watch Marcus try to apply these ancient lessons. He will fail at first. He will try to force himself to be flowy, which doesn't work. He will struggle to let go of his ego. But slowly, he will discover that when he stops fighting the river actually carries him where he needs to go. Marcus's story is a mirror. As he learns to find his center, to become soft like water, and to embrace the void, you will find yourself doing the same. His breakthroughs will become your breakthroughs. The journey ahead, the path we are taking, is divided into 20 chapters, each focusing on a specific piece of the Taoist puzzle. We will start by finding your center and returning to your original nature, the person you were before the world told you who to be. We will explore the paradox of why softness always beats hardness, and how to lead others without being noticed. We will dive deep into the concept of Wu Wei and learn the internal alchemy of turning your stress into wisdom. You will see how to master the art of timing, how to detach yourself from results so you can perform better, and how to become a humble stream that influences everyone it touches. This journey is not about adding more to your life. It is about taking things away. It is about removing the layers of tension, the need for control, and the carved expectations of society. It is about returning to the uncarved block, the state of pure potential where anything is possible. The 2,500-year-old librarian is waiting at the gate. He is holding out a set of scrolls that offer a different way to live. You don't have to keep struggling. You don't have to keep forcing. You can choose to step into the flow. The first step is simply to stop, to breathe, to listen. The way is already beneath your feet. Chapter 1: Finding Your Center in a World of Chaos. The clock on the wall of Marcus Thorne's corner office didn't tick. It pulsed with a soft digital glow that felt like a heartbeat. It was 4:14 a.m. In exactly 46 minutes, the Tokyo markets would open, and Marcus's company, Scale Up Solutions, was about to face its reckoning. A major server crash had wiped out the data for their 3 largest clients. If the systems weren't back online by the opening bell, the company wouldn't just lose money, it would lose its reputation. Marcus felt the familiar, hot prickle of sweat at the base of his neck. His chest was tight, a sensation he had lived with for 3 years, ever since the divorce. He paced the glass-walled room, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of the Chicago skyline. He had already called the head of IT 4 times. He had sent 6 urgent emails. He was driving the process, or so he told himself. In reality, he was a man trying to hold back a flood with a toothpick. His hands were shaking, and his vision blurred at the edges. This was the force driver in his natural habitat, anxious, reactive, and physically drained, convinced that if he didn't scream loud enough or work hard enough, the world would stop spinning. He didn't know it yet, but Marcus was looking for something that ancient wisdom had identified thousands of years ago. He was looking for his center. He thought the solution was more action, more control, and more pressure. He didn't realize that the more he pushed, the more the world pushed back. The gap between the blow and the pain. In 1942, a man named Viktor Frankl found himself in a situation that makes a server crash look like a minor inconvenience. Frankl was a psychiatrist, a man of science and intellect, who was suddenly stripped of his career, his home, and his family. He was sent to a series of Nazi concentration camps, including the infamous Auschwitz. In these camps, every external thing that defined a person was taken away. There was no CEO status. There were no quarterly reports. There was only the brutal reality of cold, hunger, and the constant threat of death. Most people in that environment reacted with understandable terror or a complete loss of will. They were forced by their circumstances. But Frankl noticed something strange in himself and a few others. He noticed that even when the guards took away his clothes, his name, and his dignity, they could not take away one specific thing: his ability to choose how he felt about what was happening. Frankl discovered what many modern psychologists now call the stimulus-response gap. In our daily lives, something happens, the stimulus, and we react, the response. The server crashes, and Marcus yells. The traffic is bad, and we get angry. We think the reaction is automatic, like a knee hitting a hammer. But Frankl realized that there is a tiny gap between the blow and the pain, microscopic space between the event and our reaction. In that space lies our freedom. This is the very essence of the Taoist center. The Tao Te Ching teaches that the world will always be in motion. There will always be stimulus. There will always be chaos, change, and decay. If you try to control the chaos, you become part of it. You become a leaf caught in a hurricane. But if you find the center, that space Frankl identified, you become the eye of the storm. Frankl survived the camps, not because he was the strongest or the most aggressive, but because he maintained his internal way. He spent his days visualizing himself giving lectures about the psychology of the camps after the war was over. He turned his suffering into a study. He became a hollow pipe for his experiences. Instead of the pain hitting him like a solid wall and shattering him, he let the experience flow through him. He was present, but he was not attached to the horror. He had found a point of stillness that the external world could not touch. The librarian in the middle of the fire. To understand how this stillness works in practice, we have to look back much further than 1942. Around 2,600 years ago, in the heart of the Zhou dynasty in ancient China, a man named Laozi was living through his own version of a slow-motion car crash. Laozi wasn't a general or a king. He was the keeper of the archives, a librarian. He sat at the center of the empire's information. He saw the records of every war, every tax hike, and every failed policy. He watched as the social fabric of his world began to unravel. The Zhou dynasty was decaying. Greed was high, and the government was becoming more rigid and bureaucratic to compensate for its loss of actual power. Laozi observed a curious pattern. The more rules the state created to keep people in line, the more criminals appeared. The more the leaders tried to force the country into being prosperous, the poorer and more miserable the people became. He saw the force drivers of his time, the politicians and generals, trying to fix problems by applying more pressure. As the librarian, Laozi was the center of this crumbling empire. People came to him for historical precedents and wisdom. He saw that everyone was looking for a way to win or survive by fighting against the current of history. Laozi took a different path. He didn't try to save the empire through force. He didn't write a manifesto on how to fix the government. Instead, he practiced the way, the Tao. He realized that the universe has a natural rhythm much like a river. If you swim against it, you drown. If you try to hold on to the bank, you eventually lose your grip. But if you align yourself with the center of the flow, you move with incredible speed and very little effort. Eventually, the chaos became too much. Laozi decided to leave. He didn't leave in a fit of rage or a dramatic protest. He simply mounted an ox and began to ride toward the western wilderness. He was leading for the Hanggu Pass, the edge of the known world. He was choosing to step out of the stimulus of the decaying city and into the center of nature. It was at that gate, at the edge of the world, that a guard named Yinsi recognized him. Yinsi knew that if this man left, his wisdom would go with him. He begged the old librarian to write down his thoughts. Laozi sat down and in a few days wrote the 5,000 characters that became the Tao Te Ching. The core message he left behind was simple. You cannot find peace by rearranging the world. You find peace by finding the part of you that the world cannot rearrange. The framework of the still point. Finding your center isn't a mystical event that happens on a mountaintop. It is a practical mental model that you can use when your server crashes at 4 o'clock in the morning. To move from being a force driver to a flow master, you need to understand the 3 components of the still point framework. The witness, observation without judgment. The hollow pipe, non-resistance. The pivot, acting from the gap. The first pillar is the witness. Most of us are so involved in our problems that we are the problem. When Marcus's servers go down, he isn't observing a server crash. He is becoming the crash. His identity is tied to the success of the company. So a failure of the company feels like a failure of his very self. The witness is the part of you that can step back and watch the chaos. It's the mental shift from saying, I am stressed, to, I notice a feeling of stress in my body. When you become the witness, you are no longer the leaf in the hurricane. You are the person standing on the porch watching the wind blow. This shift alone creates the gap that Viktor Frankl discovered. The second pillar is the hollow pipe. This is the thematic heart of Taoist power. Think about a flute or a straw. Its only value is its emptiness. If a flute were solid wood, it would just be a stick. Because it is hollow, it can turn a breath of air into music. In a world of chaos, we often try to be solid. We think that being tough or rigid will protect us. But solid things break. Rigid trees snap in the wind. A hollow pipe, however, allows the force to pass through it. When bad news hits, a flow master doesn't build a wall against it. They stay open. They let the information flow through them without getting stuck in their ego. This prevents the cortisol spike that ruins our health and our decision-making. The third pillar is the pivot. Once you have observed the situation as a witness and let the initial shock flow through you like a hollow pipe, you are now in the gap. Now you can act. But this action isn't a reaction. It's a pivot. A reaction is defensive and hurried. A pivot is precise. It's like a martial artist who waits until the opponent is fully committed to a punch, then takes one small step to the side. The opponent's own force carries them past. The pivot is acting with the minimum amount of energy required to achieve the maximum result. The eye of the storm and the flow state. We see this still point framework in nature and in high-performance psychology. Consider the eye of the storm. In a Category 5 hurricane, winds can reach 157 miles per hour. Houses are leveled. Trees are uprooted. But in the exact center, the eye, the air is often calm. Sometimes the sun even shines through. The hurricane needs the eye to exist. The rotation of the storm is organized around that point of stillness. If the eye were to become turbulent, the storm would lose its structure and dissipate. Your life is the same. Your storm might be a high-pressure job, a difficult family dynamic, or a health crisis. If you have no eye, your life becomes a chaotic mess of flying debris. If you have a center, you can organize the chaos into something productive. Modern psychology has a name for this. In the 1960s, a researcher named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi began studying people who performed at elite levels: surgeons, mountain climbers, and chess players. He found that when they were at their best, they weren't trying hard. In fact, they described a feeling of effortlessness. They were in a state where the challenge of the task perfectly matched their skill level. In this state, the ego disappears. The person isn't thinking, I hope I don't mess this up, or I wonder what people will think of me. They have become a hollow pipe for their skill. They are acting from the center. This is Wu Wei, or effortless action. You cannot reach a flow state if you are a force driver, because flow requires a lack of friction. Friction is what happens when your ego gets in the way of the task. Back in the Chicago office, the clock now read 4:22 a.m. Marcus was about to hit redial on the IT director's phone for the 5th time. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Then he stopped. He didn't stop because he was lazy. He stopped because he remembered a phrase from that dusty book his mentor had left him years ago. To the mind that is still, the whole universe surrenders. Marcus sat down in his chair. He didn't look at the monitors. He didn't look at the clock. He closed his eyes. He tried to become the witness. He watched his own panic. He noticed how his breath was shallow and his jaw was clenched. He didn't judge himself for being panicked. He just noticed it. He imagined himself as that hollow pipe. He let the stimulus, the fear of the market opening, the fear of losing the bank client, flow through him. He didn't try to solve the problem for 60 seconds. He just sat in the gap. When he opened his eyes, the servers were still down. The crisis hadn't vanished, but Marcus had changed. His blood pressure had dropped. His vision was clear. He didn't call the IT director again. Instead, he sent a short, calm text. "Jim, I know the pressure is on. I trust your team. Focus on the core database first. We can handle the client communication from here. What do you need from me to clear the path?" 10 seconds later, Jim replied, "Thanks, Marcus. The panic was slowing us down. We found the bug. Routing the backup now. We'll be up in 20. By yelling and micromanaging, Marcus had been creating noise that prevented his team from working. By finding his center, he had removed the friction. He had moved from force to flow. The reframe: chaos is not the enemy. We spend our lives trying to eliminate chaos. We want the perfect schedule, the stable economy, and the predictable relationship. We view chaos as a problem to be solved. The Taoist perspective offers a radical reframe. Chaos is not the problem. Your resistance to chaos is the problem. Think of a river. If you place a large, square, unyielding rock in the middle of a fast-moving stream, what happens? The water hits the rock with violence. It creates spray, noise, and erosion. The rock is fighting the river, and eventually the rock will be worn down to nothing. But if you place a rounded, smooth stone in that same spot, the water flows over and around it. There is less noise, there is less wear and tear. The stone isn't fighting the water. It is simply existing within it. The world will always be a fast-moving stream. There will always be stuff happening. If you try to be a square rock, rigid, demanding, and controlling, you will end up burned out and broken. You will be a force driver until the day your body or your mind gives out. Finding your center means becoming the rounded stone. It means realizing that the chaos is just energy. It isn't bad or good. Until you label it. When you stop labeling every event as a disaster, you stop the internal force driver from taking the wheel. You don't need a quieter world. You need a quieter mind. The stimulus-response gap is always there, waiting for you to step into it. Whether you are facing a concentration camp, a decaying empire, or a Monday morning meeting, the way remains the same. You find the point of stillness within yourself, and you let the rest of the world spin. The journey of the Flow Master begins with this single realization. The center is not a place you go. It is a place you stay. It is the still point from which all effective action grows. When you find it, you don't just survive the chaos, you lead through it. Chapter 2: The Uncarved Block. Returning to Original Nature. In a bright laboratory at the University of Virginia, a group of researchers gave people a simple task. They handed each person a Lego structure. One side of the structure was taller than the other, making it wobbly. A heavy brick rested on the top, threatening to tip the whole thing over. The scientists told the participants they could fix the structure so it could hold the weight. Most people were told they would earn $1 for every block they changed. The researchers watched closely. Almost every person who walked into the room did the same thing. They grabbed more Lego blocks and started building. They added pillars. They added supports. They tried to make the short side taller so it would match the high side. Only a tiny number of people, less than 20%, did the simplest thing possible. They didn't add anything. Instead, they reached out and took one single block away from the tall side. By subtracting, the structure became level, strong, and stable. This study revealed something deep about the human brain. We have a bias for addition. When we want to improve our lives, our jobs, or our health, our first instinct is to add. We add more tasks to our to-do list. We buy more books. We sign up for more classes. We buy more stuff to make us feel better. We think that to be better, we must become more. Lao Tzu, the ancient sage who wrote the Tao Te Ching, would have laughed at those Lego results.